The champagne in my glass trembled as I watched her laugh. Victoria Ashford, my husband's mistress, stood 20 feet away wearing my grandmother's necklace. The vintage Cartier piece Daniel had told me he'd sold to cover a business emergency. But there it was, glittering against her throat as she leaned into my husband's shoulder, whispering something that made him smile. That smile. The one he used to give me. The one that had disappeared from our marriage about a year ago, right around the time he hired her as director of sales at his real estate firm. I'm Elena Martins. I'm 34 years old, and I'm standing in the Perez Art Museum in Miami watching my entire life unravel at a charity gala I helped organize. The irony isn't lost on me. 300 of Miami's elite are here tonight. Developers, politicians, society wives, tech millionaires. Everyone who matters. And they're all about to witness something nobody expected. My best friend Claudia appeared at my elbow. Elena, don't look at them. Her voice was urgent, worried. Let's just leave. You don't need to put yourself through this. But I couldn't leave. I'd spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment. 3 weeks since I hired the private investigator. 3 weeks since I learned the truth about what Daniel had been doing. 3 weeks planning my response. Let me tell you how I got here. How a woman who thought she had everything discovered she'd been living a meticulously constructed lie. 8 years ago, I met Daniel Cartwright at a networking event. I was a junior architect at a prestigious firm, already making a name for myself designing luxury condos in South Beach. Daniel was a struggling real estate agent working out of a cramped office in Coral Gables. He had ambition, charm, and absolutely nothing else. My father pulled me aside the night before our wedding. Mija, are you sure about this boy? He has nothing but dreams. I kissed his weathered cheek and laughed. Papa, that's exactly why I love him. He reminds me of you when you started. I gave Daniel everything. My savings, $47,000 I'd been putting away since I was 16. My connections to every developer and investor in Miami. My time, my energy, my strategic mind. When he couldn't close his first major deal because his hands were shaking too badly, I sat with him until 3 a.m. role-playing the negotiation. When he needed an office manager but couldn't afford one, I did his books after working 10-hour days at my own job. When he was ready to quit after a bad quarter, I was the one who convinced him to keep going. By our 5th anniversary, Cartwright Realty was one of Miami's top boutique firms. We had the penthouse in Brickell, the Mercedes, the vacations in Santorini and Bali. Parties, Daniel would wrap his arm around me and tell everyone, this is my brilliant wife, the secret weapon behind everything I've built. I'd glow with pride, thinking we were living our dream together. Cracks started small. About a year ago, Daniel began working late more often. His phone was always face down on the table, password protected. When I suggested dinner or a weekend away, he'd sigh like I was being unreasonable. Elena, I'm building something here. Can't you see the pressure I'm under? Tenderness in his voice had been replaced by irritation, as if my presence exhausted him. Then he hired Victoria Ashford. She's exactly what we need to break into the ultra-high-end market, he'd said over breakfast one morning, barely looking up from his laptop. Closed 8 figures in Manhattan luxury real estate before she was 30. A shark. I met her at the company holiday party last December. She was everything I wasn't. Tall, blonde, angular where I was curved with the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from never being told no. She wore a red dress that probably cost more than our mortgage payment and shook my hand with a grip designed to prove something. So you're the famous Elena, she'd said, her ice blue eyes assessing me like I was a competitor. Daniel talks about you constantly. Always saying how supportive you are. Must be nice being married to success. The implication was clear. I was an accessory, not a partner. Daniel had laughed awkwardly and changed the subject, but I'd caught Victoria watching me throughout the night with an expression I couldn't quite read. Calculation, maybe. Or assessment, like she was measuring me for a coffin. In the months that followed, Daniel's late nights became overnight trips. Victoria and I are flying to Palm Beach to pitch the Waverly development, he'd say, already halfway out the door. Don't wait up. He stopped touching me casually. No more hand on the small of my back. No more kisses goodbye that lingered. Our bedroom became a wasteland where we slept on opposite sides of the mattress, careful not to accidentally brush against each other. I tried everything. Cooked his favorite meals. Bought expensive lingerie that sat unworn in my drawer. Suggested couples therapy, which he dismissed with a wave. I don't need therapy, Elena. I need my wife to understand that I'm trying to build a legacy here. For us, I'd asked quietly. He hadn't answered. 3 weeks ago, I found the evidence. Daniel's laptop was open on the kitchen counter and I saw an email notification pop up. Victoria Ashford, tonight was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. My hand had clicked on it before my brain could stop me. The email thread was pages long. Explicit messages, pet names, plans for a weekend in the Keys while I was supposedly visiting my parents in Orlando. My hands trembled so violently I nearly dropped the laptop. Kitchen tile beneath my feet seemed to tilt and sway. I read every word, torturing myself with the intimacy they shared, the future they were planning. Victoria had written, "When are you finally going to leave her? I'm tired of being your secret. I want everyone to know you're mine." Daniel's response made my blood freeze. "Soon, baby. I promise. I just need to handle some financial arrangements first. Can't let her take half of what I built." What I built. As if I hadn't been there from the beginning. As if my money, my connections, my midnight pep talks meant nothing. I closed the laptop carefully. My mind was strangely calm despite the hurricane beneath the surface. I walked into our bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed and began to plan. That was 3 weeks ago. I hired Kevin Vance, a private investigator my college roommate recommended. He was professional, discreet, and expensive. "Miss Martins," he'd said during our first meeting at a quiet coffee shop in Coconut Grove, "I need you to understand that whatever I find, it might be painful. Are you prepared for that?" "I need the truth," I told him. "No matter how much it hurts." Kevin's report arrived 1 week later. It was worse than I'd imagined. The affair had been going on for over a year. Daniel had been transferring money from our business accounts, significant amounts for $0.2 million, to offshore accounts in Victoria's name. He'd purchased a condo in Toronto using our joint funds. There were emails between them discussing how to minimize my take in the inevitable divorce, texts about hiding assets in shell corporations. But the worst part was a conversation Kevin had recorded between Daniel and Victoria at a restaurant in Coral Gables. I'd listened to it 3 times, each time feeling like I was being stabbed. Victoria's voice saying, "When are you going to tell her?" Daniel's response, "I'm not. I'll go to Toronto, set everything up, and after 6 months I'll tell her I met someone else there. That way she can't claim I was cheating. She'll look petty if she fights the divorce." They'd laughed. Ashley laughed about destroying my life. I met with Marcus Blackwood, the best divorce attorney in Miami. His office occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise with views stretching from South Beach to the Everglades. He'd listened to my story, reviewed the evidence, and leaned back in his leather chair. "Mrs. Cartwright," he'd said, "you have an excellent case. With evidence of his affair and the financial fraud, you're entitled to far more than the standard 50%. We can pursue criminal charges for the embezzlement." "I don't just want a divorce," I told him. "I want justice. I want everyone to know what he did." Marcus had smiled. "Then we need to be strategic about when and how we expose him." That's when I told him about tonight. The grand opening of Cartwright Family Towers, Daniel's biggest development project. 300 investors would be there. The mayor, city councilors, the press. Everyone Daniel had been trying to impress for the past decade. "It's the perfect venue," I'd said. "Public, high profile, and he won't be able to run from it." Marcus had nodded approvingly. "Scorched earth. I like it." Now here I was, watching Daniel and Victoria work the room like a power couple. She had her hand on his arm possessively, laughing at something he whispered. My stolen necklace glittered at her throat. My grandmother's bracelet on her wrist. Jewelry Daniel had told me was being cleaned or was locked in our safe. Claudia gripped my arm. Elena, I'm serious. Everyone's staring. This is humiliating. Let's go. But I saw something that made me smile. Victoria had noticed me watching. She said something to Daniel, who glanced my way with an expression of pure contempt. Then deliberately, slowly, Victoria leaned up and kissed him on the mouth. Right there, in front of everyone. The message was unmistakable. I won. He chose me. Look what I took from you. Conversations around us had hushed. Society wives who'd called me friend for years suddenly found their champagne glasses fascinating. I could feel their pity, their schadenfreude. Poor Elena Martins. Replaced by a younger, prettier model. How predictable. Something inside me hardened. No, I said to Claudia. We're not leaving. I have something to handle first. I walked through the crowd, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Every eye followed me. Victoria saw me coming and whispered to Daniel, who turned with a bored expression. Elena, he said flatly. Enjoying the party? Victoria's fingers played with my grandmother's necklace. Beautiful event, she added. You really outdid yourself with the decorations. So tasteful. The word hung between us like an insult. Tasteful. Safe. Boring. I smiled at her. Victoria, that's an exquisite necklace. Vintage Cartier, if I'm not mistaken? Her hand flew to it protectively. It was a gift. How thoughtful. I turned to Daniel. Darling, could I speak with you privately for just a moment? It's about the Waverly project. His jaw tightened. This isn't the time, Elena. It'll only take a minute. Unless you want me to discuss the financials here. I let the threat hang in the air. Daniel's eyes narrowed, but he nodded curtly. Victoria started to follow, but I held up a hand. This is business, Victoria. I'm sure you understand. Once we were in a quieter corner near the windows overlooking Biscayne Bay, Daniel rounded on me. What the hell are you doing? You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? I kept my voice low and even. I thought I was being remarkably composed, considering my husband is flaunting his mistress at an event I organized. Don't be dramatic. Victoria is my colleague, who wears my jewelry and sleeps in our bed when I'm conveniently out of town. His face flushed. You've been spying on me? You've been stealing from me. I pulled out my phone and showed him screenshots. These are wire transfers from our joint business account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Account holder, Victoria Marie Ashford. Total transferred in the last 6 months, $4.2 million. Color drained from his face. How did I find out? Daniel, I helped build Cartwright Realty. I know every account, every transaction. Did you really think I wouldn't notice millions disappearing? That money is mine. I earned it. With my capital, my connections, my strategic input. I'm a 40% owner of that company, or did you forget? Which means 40% of those transfers belong to me. You've been embezzling from your own company and from me. You can't prove anything. I smiled. Actually, I can. I have copies of everything. Transfers, emails between you and Victoria discussing how to minimize my take in the inevitable divorce, texts about hiding assets. You've been very sloppy, Daniel. His hand shot out and gripped my arm hard enough to bruise. Listen to me very carefully, Elena. You're going to delete those files and walk away quietly. I'll give you enough to live on, but if you fight me, I will bury you. I know people. I have lawyers who will make your life hell. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. This man who'd once held me gently, who'd cried at our wedding. He'd become a stranger. No, worse than a stranger. A predator who'd been feeding on me all along. Let go of my arm, Daniel. Not until you. Let go, or I scream and everyone in this room sees you assaulting your wife. He released me immediately, panic flashing across his face. Public image was everything in his world. I rubbed my arm where his fingers had dug in. Here's what's going to happen. In 3 days, you're hosting the grand opening of Cartwright Family Towers, your biggest development project to date. 300 investors will be there. The mayor, the press, everyone who matters in Miami real estate. So I'll be there too. And Daniel, I'm going to ask Victoria one simple question. Just one. And depending on her answer and yours, either we handle this like civilized people or I burn your entire world to the ground in front of everyone you've been trying to impress. His face twisted with rage and fear. You're bluffing. Am I? I leaned in close. You have 3 days to think about whether you want to find out. I walked away before he could respond. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. I just declared war and there was no going back. Claudia met me at the exit. What did you say to him? He looks like he's seen a ghost. I gave him a preview. The main event is in 3 days. The next 72 hours were a blur of preparation. Marcus and I finalized our strategy. We compiled everything into a devastating presentation. Wire transfers, emails, text messages, recorded conversations. It was irrefutable. I also had Marcus dig deeper into something that had been nagging at me. 2 years ago, I'd had a miscarriage at 4 months. The doctors said it was just one of those things, unexplained. But Kevin had found something in Daniel's online purchase history that made my blood run cold. A receipt for misoprostol, an abortion medication, purchased from an overseas pharmacy and shipped to his office. The timing matched perfectly with when I'd lost the baby. I'd spent 2 days in bed after that discovery, crying until I had no tears left. Daniel hadn't just betrayed me with Victoria. He'd murdered our child because the baby would have complicated his plans to leave me. Marcus had looked grim when I showed him the evidence. Mrs. Martins, if this is true, we're talking about assault causing bodily harm at minimum, possibly attempted murder. This goes far beyond divorce. I want him destroyed, I'd said, my voice hollow. Completely destroyed. The morning of the Cartwright Family Towers launch arrived. I dressed carefully in a white Armani suit, powerful and professional. Minimal jewelry, just simple pearl earrings. I looked like I was going to war. 'Cause I was. The launch was being held at the Tower Sales Center, a stunning glass pavilion with views of the skeletal high-rise under construction. Daniel had spared no expense. Ice sculptures, champagne fountains, jazz quartet, servers with Cuban appetizers and sushi. The guest list was a who's who of Miami. This was his crowning achievement. His legacy. I arrived with Marcus and his team. Daniel stood near the entrance greeting guests, Victoria at his side playing the role of professional colleague. Neither saw me enter. At 11 sharp, Daniel took the microphone on the small stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. 10 years ago, I started Cartwright Realty with a dream. Today, that dream becomes reality with Cartwright Family Towers. He gestured to Victoria. I especially want to thank my Director of Sales, Victoria Ashford, whose tireless efforts secured our anchor investors. Victoria smiled and waved. Applause rippled through the crowd. Cartwright Family Towers represents more than luxury real estate, Daniel continued. It represents family, legacy, building something that lasts. Excuse me. I stepped forward, my voice cutting through his speech. May I say a few words? The room went silent. Daniel's face paled, but he was trapped by social convention. Course, he said tightly. My wife, Elena. I took the microphone from his hand and turned to face the crowd. Thank you all for coming today. As Daniel mentioned, family and legacy are incredibly important, which is why I wanted to take this opportunity to honor those values by telling you the truth. I could see Daniel's panic rising, see Victoria backing away. Thank you all for coming today. 8 years ago, I married Daniel Cartwright when he had nothing. I gave him my savings, $47,000, to start this business. I gave him my connections, my time, my strategic advice. I became a 40% owner in Cartwright Realty. People were leaning in now, sensing drama. 6 months ago, Daniel hired Victoria Ashford as director of sales. What most of you don't know is that they've been having an affair for over a year. What even fewer of you know is that they've been systematically embezzling millions from Cartwright Realty, money that belongs to me and to the investors in this room, and hiding it in offshore accounts. Gasps erupted. Daniel lunged forward. This is insane. She's lying. Am I? I pulled out a remote and clicked it. Behind me, the screen that had been showing architectural renderings suddenly displayed bank statements, wire transfers, emails between Daniel and Victoria. $4.2 million, I continued. Transferred from Cartwright Realty to an offshore account in Victoria's name over the past 6 months. Crowd was murmuring, some investors pulling out phones. Victoria's face had gone white. I didn't. Daniel told me that money was. Shut up, Daniel hissed at her. I turned to look directly at Victoria. This was it. The moment I'd been building toward. Victoria, I said, my voice clear and cold. I have just one question for you. She stared at me, frozen. Did you know that the money Daniel used to buy you that diamond bracelet you're wearing, the one from Cartier that cost $85,000, was originally in an account I'd set aside for fertility treatments? Her eyes went wide. What? No, fertility treatments I needed because 2 years ago I had a miscarriage. Except it wasn't a miscarriage, was it, Daniel? You poisoned me. You put abortion medication in my prenatal vitamins because Victoria wanted you to leave me and a baby would complicate that. Crowd erupted. Shouts, gasps, people pulling out phones to record. That's insane, Daniel shouted. She's having a breakdown. Someone get security. I have proof. I clicked the remote again. Medical records appeared on screen, highlighting the unexplained medication in my system. Then text messages between Daniel and Victoria from 2 years ago discussing how the pregnancy problem was being handled. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Daniel, you told me she miscarried naturally. You said. She looked at me with dawning horror. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about that. But you knew about the money, I said. You knew about the offshore accounts. She looked at Daniel desperately. He told me it was legal, that it was smart business. Shut the fuck up, Victoria, Daniel screamed. 2 detectives I'd arranged to have present pushed through the crowd. Daniel Cartwright, you're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and assault causing bodily harm. Victoria Ashford, you're also under arrest as an accomplice to fraud. The room exploded into chaos. Daniel tried to run but was tackled. Victoria burst into hysterical tears, screaming that she'd been duped. I walked off the stage straight to Marcus. The emergency board meeting is in an hour, he said. With Daniel's arrest, you now have controlling interest in the company. I watched as Daniel was led away in handcuffs, still screaming about his lawyers. Victoria was cuffed separately, her makeup running, her carefully constructed image destroyed. The fallout was nuclear. The story dominated Miami news for weeks. The investigation uncovered even more fraud, a total exceeding $12 million. Daniel was facing 20 to 30 years in federal prison. Victoria, in exchange for cooperation, got 5 years. Her legal career was over. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I got everything. Company now renamed Martins Development Group. Penthouse. The art collection. Daniel's lawyer tried to fight it, but with his criminal convictions he had no leverage. I didn't start dating immediately. I spent a year focusing on myself. Therapy, yoga, travel. I learned I didn't need a man to feel complete. But eventually I did meet someone. Gabriel Torres, a civil rights attorney who'd helped with the investor restitution. He was kind, brilliant, honest. He made me laugh. A year after we met, he proposed on a quiet beach in Key Largo. Elena, he'd said, I know you've been through hell. But I promise I see you, I value you, and I will spend every day proving I'm worthy of your faith. I cried, but they were healing tears. Yes, I'll marry you. We had a small wedding on my parents' farm. My father walked me down an aisle of wildflowers. I'm so proud of you, Mija, he whispered. You survived. You fought back. You won. A year later, our daughter was born. Sophia, named after my grandmother. She has my dark hair and Gabriel's gentle eyes. 5 years have passed since that day at the tower's launch. Daniel is serving 25 years. Victoria was denied parole twice. Martins Development Group is now one of the top sustainable development firms in South Florida. We won a national award for ethical business practices. Last week, I spoke at a women's business conference. Afterward, a young woman approached me, her eyes red. Mrs. Torres, I just found out my husband is cheating with his assistant. They've been stealing from our business. Everyone says I should just take a settlement and move on quietly. I took her hands. Do you have evidence? She nodded. Good. Then don't move on quietly. Fight. Document everything. Get the best lawyer you can afford. And when the time is right, make sure everyone knows the truth. Not for revenge, for justice. She'd hugged me, sobbing. Thank you for showing us we don't have to accept it. That night, lying in bed with Gabriel sleeping beside me and Sophia's monitor broadcasting her peaceful breathing, I thought about that question I'd asked Victoria. Did you know? It was such a simple question. But it had been powerful enough to crack open an entire empire of lies. Sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't complicated. Sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to stand up and ask, did you know what you were doing to me? I don't regret asking it. I don't regret the fallout. Because on the other side of that destruction was freedom, justice, and a life I'd built for myself, a life no one could ever steal again. My husband's mistress smirked at me that night, dripping in jewels bought with my money, confident she'd won. She had no idea I was about to ask one simple question that would destroy her completely. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat.